Good day, my name is Miguel Caro, and with my friend Gemma Moreno, we are going to make this video review about Braveheart. To make things easier for us to explain, we have divided the following points as to make it easier for us to explain the movie in itself and its contents in the British Empire. For the following points will be basic information about the movie, the historical context based in the British Empire and how it became to be, the historical information relevant to this historical context, highlighted data, which in this case means like the different points of the movie that we find interesting for us to explain or to make an extra point of it, the critical review, which will be what we find like interesting about the movie or what we see as positives and negatives, and on a conclusion about the movie, as we find it like a different or interesting movie to see for the people as a context on the British Empire to understand it, or if we find it lacking for it.
It was directed by Mel Gibson, who was also the producer and the main actor of the story. Concretely, the plot is set in the 13th century, where Gibson portrays Sir William Wallace, a Scottish warrior who led the Scots in the First War of Scottish Independence against King Edward I of England.
The historical context of this movie starts with Alexander III, King of Scots, who in the 19th of March in the 1286 dies after falling from his horse. With an immediate heir after the crown, his heir will be his granddaughter, Margaret the Maid of Norway. But as he was still a child and in Norway, the Scottish lords started to set up a government of guardians for their future queen. Sadly for the Scots, Margaret falls ill on his voyage to Scotland and dies in the 26th of September 1290. With the lack of a clear heir, a period known as the competitors for the crown of Scotland, or the Great Cause, starts, where several families lay claim to the throne, starting to cause chaos in the region. To attempt to stop such chaos, the Scotland's request for King Edward I of England to be invited and to arbitrate for the Scottish nobility. It should be noted that before this process could even begin, he insists for the contenders to recognize him as Lord Paramount, which means that no other person besides God himself rules over him. They agree, and he starts his, so to speak, his small judgment. In early November, in the 1292, a great further court is held on the castle of Bermich upon Tweed, where his judgment gives favour to John Balliol as having the strongest claims for the title of the King of Scotland. Even so, Edward proceeds later in the same month to start invade Scotland and to reverse their rulings over the Scottish lords. In April of the same year, the Scots are defeated in the Battle of Dunbar in East Lothian, in which by July, Edward I has forced John to abdicate and he himself has taken the throne over Scotland. Throughout Scotland, there is a widespread discontent and disorder after the King's Crown has extended its dominion over Scotland itself, and this discontent is better represented by a protagonist of this movie and in this small part of history, which is William Wallace, who starts a revolution against Edward I, in which its first major action should be noted to be the murder of the Sheriff of Lanark, William Helsbeth, whose murder, so to speak, starts the desire from William Wallace to start to rebel against Edward I. Soon afterwards, he starts going to the end of his countrymen and starts a rebel army against Edward I. Besides numerous battles and skirmishes, Wallace is defeated in the Battle of Fall Creek in 1896 and has later attempted to run and hide for multiple years, besides a few little skirmishes and his attempts, until in the 13th of 5, where John Menden gives him to the English soldiers in Glasgow. Because of this, she is later sentenced and executed over multiple charges, with the officer's emphasis in treason for the English crown. As to make an example of Wallace, to want any other would-be rebel to start a similar war against him, Edward has Wallace voided quarter, so to speak, that his head is cut off and extremities as well, and has each piece of his body been moved and displayed in various parts of England as a warning for any would-be rebels. That is, beside discounting the fact that he was also disemboweled, has his intestines born off before being executed. In other words, and he was made like an example for any would-be rebel, like a great warning to not try it, or this will be what will happen to you.
Information of the film, some kings and other important characters appear. Thereby, the movie is based on the story of William Wallace, one of the greatest heroes of Scotland, who led the Scottish resistance forces against England during the First War of Independence. Moreover, referring to royalty, it is easy to identify Edward I Longshanks, King of England from 1272 to 1307, who was also known as the Hammer of the Scots, due to the several conflicts that he held against the Scottish people. Edward II, his son, also plays an important role in the film, first as a prince and later as the next king, who continuously tried to please his father without much success. We can also see Isabel I of France as Edward II's wife, who in the story has a romantic affair with Wallace. Finally, other important characters are Robert the Elder and his son, Robert Bruce Braveheart, the truly heir of the Scottish throne and who freed Scotland from English rule. In addition, through the movie, three important events in the First War of Scottish Independence appear. Firstly, the Battle of Stirling in 1297, which was the first major Scottish victory, where the Scots took control again of their country and raised Wallace to a position of political dominance. Secondly, the Battle of Falkirk in 1298 in Scotland's central lowlands, where the army of King Edward I defeated the Scottish army and destroyed Wallace's reputation as a general. Finally, the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, after Wallace's execution, where the army of Robert Bruce, the legitimate King of Scots, defeated the English army under the command of King Edward II of England, son of the late king. It supposed the restoration of Scottish independence under the Treaty of Edinburgh-Northampton.
In highlighted data, we find 2 points that we believe to be very interesting to point out. Will be first with all the William speech, in which in the movie William has a very famous scene in which he gives a speech to his troops before what they believe to be the final attack, which will be the Battle of Hastings. And it is interesting for us because they basically is as like a small point that is like the feeling that all the Scots in that time had, which is the fact that yes, they may leave if they decide to allow the Britons rule, but they will never be truly alive, as they will never be actually Scots. They will just be another group of people that are under Britain's thumb. So they believe that fighting this battle may be the best option, even if they die. At the least they will die as Scots and not as another people under the Britain's crown. And another part that we find interesting is after William's death, which is somewhat dramatized, but it's actually interesting because in the movie he still refuses the Britain's rule with a scream of freedom against mercy, which a cleric requests of him, as if he would have requested mercy, screaming it to be more exact, he actually would have been spared his life, which in reality that would have never been an option. And we find it interesting because in the movie he simply has his head cut off, and that's it. That's in this enemy zone. Is that like the part like movie is done? William has died for his freedom of his people. In reality, he was not only disemboweled, he was demasculinized, which means that his genitals were cut off. He had his testicles born before he died, and the other was quartered, meaning that his head was cut off and his limbs were also separated before being placed in different parts of England as a warning for any rebel. So it was interesting that the movie, obviously, they needed to make it not as gruesome as it actually was, like to give ratings and all of that. We find it interesting that they at the release still try to find that feeling of the freedom of Scots is what William Wallace is really interested, even in the face of death.
After watching the movie, it is important to explain what our impression is and why. First, it must be pointed out that some themes or events are not accurate according to historians. Although Wallace's real life was Marion Braveheart, it is a fact that she was murdered by the Sheriff of Lanark. Additionally, although the battles that appear in the movie are real events in the history of the Scottish independence, some details have been changed as the film was being made. And although Isabel I of France was the authentic wife of Edward II, the affair with Wallace was fiction because she was just a child at that time. Talking about the clothes, the English soldiers wouldn't have worn matching uniforms, and the Scottish warriors wore clothes in the film that are from a later period of time. This is just as true with the weapons, which are too big to be used in a battle. The death of Wallace is apparently really accurate, as he suffered a horrific execution to show people the consequences of treason. And finally, Robert Bruce's betrayal to Wallace is an altered event, since he was captured by another man. We cannot finish this critical review without highlighting that Braveheart really got us into Scottish history, and we truly think that it is an entertaining film without a shadow of doubt. Moreover, this movie apparently inspires people to learn more about the Scots and to visit Scotland, which, in our opinion, can only be a good thing.
In our conclusion, we have decided to divide this conclusion in three parts, which will be the fact that we found the film a really good adaptation about the actual William Wallace and his war against the British Crown, as it mostly follows in an interesting, compelling way his life and death, and is rather surprisingly accurate. There are some liberties taken for better to make the better more entertaining or to make like some twist, but for the most part the movie keeps itself rather grounded. Some difference to note, for example, is the fact that, for example, one of the wives or will be wives of Edward I falls in love with William Wallace. That never actually happens. And she also as well ends pregnant with William's son. That never actually happened as well. In the movie, he's betrayed by his countryman, and no one actually in reality knows for sure if that is actually true. No one actually knows if he was exactly betrayed, if he was a fail in his planning, if he was just caught unaware and was caught and later executed. No one actually knows for exactly. So it's an interesting fact that it mostly keeps itself accurate to the source, so to speak, accurate to the history of William Wallace, but it takes some liberties that, while it doesn't really change much, it makes an interesting movie to see. And we believe that it's actually really properly act. It's really interesting to see the actors. The person that actually makes of William Wallace in the scene that he screams for freedom makes it really interesting. Edward the First is portrayed as someone that is like potent as a person, that is interesting to see, that he has energy, but he's obviously really tired and really annoying about Wallace. The different people that Wallace follow are shown to have a really good fervor and with a good illusion and desire to follow Wallace to rebel against British control and actually be referred to as Scots and Scotland and not just another place than the Britain Crown has his boss over it. So we believe that it's actually a pretty good film that if you wish to see it like to know a little more of British history, it's a pretty good one. Just keep in mind that it doesn't really like replace the actual history. There are some things that they have changed, but to give it like a good look and have a good feel about it, we believe that it's a really good movie to see. And as such, this will be our conclusion and the end of this video review. Many thanks for seeing them, and we thank you for your attention during it.